Welcome to Formula World. I'm your host Dylan Shelley, and here's what's on this episode. First up on Formula World, Ricciardo had meetings with McLaren. Before Ricciardo signed for Renault, his options for teams was narrowed down to Red Bull, Renault and McLaren, with Red Bull being the choice that most people predicted he would take. Since then, McLaren boss Zak Brown has come out saying that there were indeed meetings with the Australian and believes he may have been close to securing the Aussie driver. We had a couple of meetings and we are a big fan of Daniel's. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a great race car driver. How close we came to getting him, I think only Daniel knows the answer to that question. Had we been running more competitively, I think that we would have increased our odds. I think he had a strong desire to leave, and I think it was probably pretty close between us and Renault. But ultimately, Daniel would be best to tell you how close. But he was certainly someone that we rate very highly and think he's a great race car driver and a great guy. Hulkenberg welcomes Ricciardo. Nico Hulkenberg has been the unchallenged number one driver since he joined Renault, but this all may change now that he will be partnered by Daniel Ricciardo. However, Hulkenberg isn't bothered, but in fact welcomed his new teammate with praise. Daniel is a great driver and a man who can do everything. I do not have to hide from the challenge that awaits me this season, but for me, having such a great teammate is only positive, but it also shows how serious Renault is, if you're one of the drivers to get the top 3 in. Red Bull drastically lowers expectations of Honda. Earlier in the year, when Red Bull announced a power unit deal with Honda, Red Bull boss Christian Horner came out saying that they would be just as competitive as they are now. But more recently, Horner has begun to downplay their expectations and says that the first year with Honda will be more of an interim year. I certainly expect that the first year will be an interim year for us. Compared to the competition, the necessary steps still have to be taken at Honda. McLaren has 2 open seats. With no word on Fernando Alonso's future and Stoffel Vandoorne struggling to meet expectations, many people have been wondering what McLaren's lineup may look like next year, especially with the likes of junior driver Lando Norris coming through the ranks. McLaren boss Zak Brown opened up about the team's options and says that as of now, they have 2 seats available. We want to keep Lando in the family. We're waiting to see ultimately what Fernando wants to do because it's also about the package, experience and youth, especially in the situation where we're building. We're not prioritizing one over the other. We know our situation with Stoffel and we're seeing what other opportunities may or may not be available. Reality is that we have 2 open seats and it's our job to get the best driver situation possible, and that requires talking to other drivers up and down the pit lane. Mercedes rather go up in flames. It is becoming widely accepted that Ferrari have the best car in the paddock, and Mercedes boss Toto Wolff agrees, and when asked if they can compete against Ferrari for the remainder of the year, had this to say: "Well, we are going to. We will leave no stone unturned in order to match that. We would rather go up in flames than not match the performance." Now we know what the level of performance is with Ferrari. You see it every day on track, and that is something which we are very eager and we are very motivated to achieve. We are not going on a rest until we have done that. Fast feed. Rumours that Max Verstappen will use his veto to prevent Sainz from racing alongside him at Red Bull. Former F1 driver turned pundit Martin Brundle says if Carlos Sainz doesn't get a strong drive in F1 next year, it will be a travesty. Haas team boss Gunther Steiner suggested that stewards give more lenient penalties to big-name drivers. F1 CEO Chase Carey said it would be special for Michael Schumacher's son Mick to have the chance to be in F1. Kimi Räikkönen says there is no politics or other bullshit between himself and teammate Sebastian Vettel. And Niki Lauda awakens from a coma following a lung transplant operation. Formula World fans react, Bottas wingman and Ricciardo Renault. 2 episodes ago on Formula World, I asked whether you thought Bottas is just Hamilton's wingman, and the results are in, where 78% of you do think he's a number 2 driver and 22% of you don't think so. And in the closest poll to date on Formula World, when I asked whether you thought Daniel Ricciardo had made the right decision by going to Renault, it was split dead even 50-50 yes and no. Who will be driving for McLaren next season? Be sure to vote in the poll and let me know what you think in the comments. And a special thanks to Blaze Hope and KC Croker for becoming Formula World members and supporting the show. And if you like this video, feel free to subscribe and check out my other videos for all the latest in the world of Formula 1.